Do you feel like your songs aren't quite creating this harmonic landscape that matches what it is that you're writing? Almost like the visuals of a movie, making sure that they match the storyline and the dialogue. What I want to tackle today is modes and understanding them as that very thing, right? This emotional landscape. Is it matching my lyrical content? If you don't know, my name is Ryan Gahn. I am a Berklee College graduate for songwriting. I've written songs that have been on TV multiple times, movies, commercial, international radio, and so forth. And I do teach a mentorship program. If you're interested, you can just drop a comment, mentorship, and I will reach out to you about that. But this is a segment from that mentorship that I would like to share for free with you, to really understand how to use modes once you understand what modes are. Okay, so this doesn't go into understanding modes and understanding what chord progression is in what key color, what mode color. All right, you should already know that to really utilize the information that's in this. So hope you enjoy it, and I will see you in the next video. All right, now that we have a better understanding of the modes and how to look at a chord progression and understand what mode it's in, we could talk about a little bit more of a deep dive into each one of them, as far as either creating your own or just to try to understand why a song harmonically sounds a certain way, to you. We're going to start with the brightest, Ionian. Now, some people say Lydian is. We will get to that because Lydian will be next, okay? But for my Ionian, I personally think Ionian major scale is the brightest, mainly because it gives me this very finalized feel. If I resolve it, back to the one that Lydian, which will be the next mode, doesn't give me. It doesn't have that sort of finalized, dominant to the one chord. So I do consider Ionian the brightest. Now, what's really cool about the way we can, or other, songwriters and composers can manipulate a mode, is by manipulating the brightness of that overarching brightness or darkness of the mode. So what I mean by that is, if I have my Ionian and I decide to just play a 1, a 4, or a 5, I'm utilizing all the major chords. So that is going to sound the brightest in one of, if not the brightest mode. So right back to my 1 to my 5. A song like Brown Eyed Girl or something like that. There's a million, believe me, but that gives that sort of a feel. There is a 6th chord in there, right, to that E minor at one point. But that overarching brightness feel. Now, I'm not tapping into any of the minor. So if I'm staying on just the major chords, the brightest chords, in the brightest mode, and giving it a dominant to a 1, I'm really utilizing that as far as like pushing the brightness. Now, what's really cool is I can take Ionian and say, all right, I'm still, it's the brightest mode, right? And that's going to be my sort of key color, Ionian. But I can start darkening it up. Now, as to juxtapose what I was just playing there, which was a 1, a 4, a 1 to a 5, back to the resolve, back to that 1, right? I'm going to go the opposite way. Now, that the first chord in the progression generally is going to set up whatever the key color is, right? So in this case, I'm going to start with my 1 chord, okay? And I'm now just going to play minors. So I can have a 1 to a 3 to a 6, back to a 3. That sink it a little bit. Now I have the brightest mode, key color, but I'm really taking the brightness away inside of the bright key color. only that first chord's major. Everything else is minor in a 4-chord progression. Now, of course, we can not play a 4-chord progression and manipulate it, but that's what we're really giving. The first chord is definitely the key center. It's definitely Ionian, G Ionian, but then adding the 3, which is a minor chord, the 6, which is a minor chord, and then back to the 3. Even that 3 has a little bit of a dominant function back to the 1. Right now we're dominant. We're mostly putting on the 5/7 or the 5 chord back to the 1 chord. But there is a slight dominant function when we get further into theory with a 3 chord. So again, we are in the brightest mode and we're darkening within the brightest mode. Okay, if that makes sense. So if you're, whatever the song is or what you're coming up with can sort of be like the overarching theme, and the thought could be everything in life is fine. Right now I'm going through something that's difficult, right? That's sort of the mood that I would sort of put into that. Sort of put into that idea. I get back to my 1 chord. There is a structure and a happy structure to it, and a bright structure, I should say, if that's the word that I'm going for, with that 1 chord. But maybe things have just been a little strange, a little bad, whatever. Going through a heartbreak that I know isn't going to last that long. I can go into a million, sort of like ideas of how to set that up as far as like the stability or instability of that particular progression. But now we can mix and match. You know what I mean? Do I want that real dominant function, 5 to a 1? Do I want to stray away from that, but stay bright? Maybe just a 1/4. Gives me something super bright, and it doesn't hammer home the stability, the super stability of my Ionian. It's still structurally stable and very bright, but because I don't have that 5 to a 1 that the Ionian lends me, right? And I'm not tapping into that super hard resolved structured feel, but I am staying all bright within that progression just by doing a 1 to a 4, right? And so on. I could have a 1, a 4, 6, 5. Right? Okay, that's 6. A little bit darkens it a little bit, but I come back around with a 5 to a 1. Now what if I do 1, 4, 6, 3? Now I'm sort of playing the back end of that 4-chord progression dark, and the front end a little bit brighter. Again, those are all things that you can mess with within a generally stable. So if we're looking at it in a songwriting perspective, right? What the subject matter, the overall subject matter, the overall storyline is going to be stable and relatively bright. That's why I really like the idea of life is going well. And if I have, one of those chord progressions that's mostly minor, life's going well, but something's bothering me right now. We're going to move to the next one, which is Lydian. Now, what we want to make sure that we're doing is when we're playing into a certain key color, mode color here, this is Lydian, is we want to make sure that we're getting that sharp 4, okay? So, and that's going to happen with the 2 major chord, right, that we're not given with Ionian. Also maybe a major or natural 7 minor chord, so a 7 root note, right? Natural 7 root note with a minor, because that 5th of that chord will give me the sharp 4. That's generally what we see for Lydian, right? If I have a 1 chord, so if I go to a 7 minor, or back to the 1 chord, to a 2 major. Both of those chords give me that sharp 4. Right now, this gives us some brightness. You know what I mean? If I were to stay, all major chords, right? And we can look at this as a 4, 1, 5, but because that 4 is the first chord, and I'm actually on that for 2 measures, so I'm really making sure that that 4 chord, or the 1 of my Lydian, right? This is really Lydian feel, is very hammered home, right? When we start getting into Lydian and Mixolydian, we want to make sure that if we're writing a song and the purpose is to stick true to the key color of that, in this case Lydian, that I want to make sure that I'm not giving too much of a resolve over to that 1. If I had, right, that sort of sounds like a 4 to a 5 to a 1 chord, right? And that 1 is actually where our key color is. That's the emphasis. I'm playing that twice, and I'm giving it a hard, dominant to tonic movement, right? So if I would say, okay, even though I'm starting on the 4, right, the whole movement brings me to the 1 chord. That's not staying true to a Lydian sound, right? So what I would do is stay on that 4 chord twice, and then a 1 to a 5. Now there's no strong resolve, and it's like, okay, this is a 1, a 5, and a major 2 in Lydian, right? So I can look at it as a 4, 1, 5, right? When I first see that progression, to figure out, okay, what each chord actually is, and then say, okay, that 4 is the key center, the key color. Okay, so now it becomes a 1, 5, major 2 in Lydian. So that's how we could stay. Now, what I love about Lydian, and it's not used very, very often, I feel like, is it has the same brightness, right? If I played that, or even more so, some people say, right? But we don't have this solid ground that a 5 to a 1, or at least Ionian, resolves us to, right? Which is really cool. Dreams by Fleetwood Mac is one of my favorite songs that really utilizes what is great about Lydian, right? And the song Dreams it makes so much sense to the happy but not stable, not solid ground, floating in a very dreamy sound, right? A very dreamy landscape can give us this very bright still, but I don't have a really solid ground to stay on, right? Now, of course, within that key color, we can manipulate more minor chords, less minor chords. I mean, this is a really interesting one, because if we're messing with that, right? A major 1 to a major 2, a 7 minor to a 6 minor. Now I have no stable ground. Sorry. Now I mixed up the 2 minor chords. I have no stable ground, right? But I'm within this sort of brightness of Lydian, but there's no stable ground, and I'm adding half of those chords being minor. So I'm going to really darken that, right? So you can mess with that all you want. It's great. What it reminds me of is a happiness that's drug induced. If I were to stay as, like that sort of 1, 5, 2, major 2, right? That's about as happy as that Lydian progression gets, It's happy, but it's almost like a false happy, like a drug-induced happy, because it doesn't have the solid, stable foundation that Ionian has. So, mess with that as you will. Next is going to be Mixolydian. So, if we're sort of looking at Ionian and Lydian as being the brightest, right? Some people say Ionian is, some people say that Lydian is. I think that they're very close. One offers a stable ground, the other one doesn't. Mixolydian is darker. We're going in the darker direction here. Why songs like "Sweet Child of Mine" by Guns N' Roses? I'm gonna jump in here. It was AC/DC's both Thunderstruck, and Highway to Hell. Those are the ones that are in Mixolydian. So what, sort of going off of those two ideas and Sweet Child of Mine is, it gives us a brighter feel because it's primarily major, or at least that one chord is off of a major, right? The 5 is a major chord. But it darkens it up, which is why you'll find it in rock, like AC/DC or like Guns N' Roses, which is such a cool function of it. In that AC/DC, they do a really good job. They have the 1 flat 7, right? That 4 major, back to the 1, and now 1, right, is the beginning and the end of that progression. So that really comes across as Mixolydian. Now, Mixolydian is a little bit more common than Lydian. So, before when we were talking about Lydian and sort of saying like, oh, don't give it too hard of a resolve back to what would be sort of the tonic in that case. The 1 chord, if you were counting that as a 4 chord for Lydian, you want the tonal center to sort of stay around that Lydian mode, right? You don't want to give it a hard resolve for a dominant sort of to a 1. And Mixolydian, we have a little bit more to play with here, but you want to make sure that you're sort of doing the same thing. Because with Sweet Child of Mine, if I had like D, C, back to D, and then okay, I don't want to resolve it like too hard. That's why Sweet Child of Mine is great, because it never does that back to the G chord. It never does what could be misconstrued as a 5 to a 1. We're staying 1 to a flat 7 to a 4 back to a 1. So we're really stuck on really utilizing that Mixolydian sound. There's a lot of like argument about if Sweet Home Alabama is actually Mixolydian. And I think that's a perfect example of it might not be, because I even though it's a 1 to a flat 7 to a 4, right? The problem is it could be I stay on that 4 twice as long as I do for the 1 and the flat 7. I stay on that 4. It could be a 5, 4, 1, right? I feel settled there, don't I? I feel pretty settled on that G. Okay, so regardless, because all of that is sort of just on paper, if I were to go for the feel of it, it doesn't necessarily feel Mixolydian the way that Sweet Child of Mine does, or Highway to Hell or Thunderstruck by AC/DC. So this is a great way, and what I love about using Sweet Child of Mine as the as the example, not just for like the great guitar solo if I'm using it in a guitar sense, but the song itself it's a great way to utilize the brightness of a major mode, but darken it up enough where, in this case, it's Guns N' Roses. You know what I mean? They're not going to write a Van Morrison song. They're not going to write a Brown Eyed Girl. So that's what I would say. And then same idea. Now what we have is the darkest of the major modes, right? The darkest of the 3, right? And sort of how Lydian and Ionian are sitting way up at the brightest, and this is going to be the darkest of the 3. So same idea. How do you want to mix and match your major chords and your minor chords? That's again up to you, especially if you're making sure that you're delivering into that idea. If I'll stay within my sort of Sweet Child of Mine D Mixolydian tonic center, right? Because I could have flat 7 to a minor 2. Okay, now getting a little bit, I'm moving a little bit darker, even if I were to slow that down, because sometimes adding a more uppity tempo, especially if I'm starting on a major chord, will give it a little bit more pep. So if I'm like, now I'm starting to get a little bit darker within that still major sounding Mixolydian, right? I could mix it up, even a little bit more. Maybe throw in, if I still wanted to sort of stay true to it, Mixolydian 5 minor. So now I have a 1, a 2 minor, a 5 minor, to 1. Okay, now I'm really darkening up that Mixolydian, already dark for a major, but it still has the sort of major tonal center being. So again, that's where we are. We're at the darkest of the 3 brighters, right? The darkest of the 3 majors. And then within that, you get to decide how much you want to change around. Again, we're going to want to aim for that flat 7. That's what we're really going to want to aim for. So just having a flat 7, boom, right off the bat, we're Mixolydian. You know what I mean? A minor 5 chord is also what we want. So that is going to deliver that sound, because that minor 5, right, that's my 5 chord, A minor. The flat 3 is the flat 7 of the D Mixolydian. So that's really going to sort of bring that out, and sort of bring that to life. That the other major modes don't have. If I'm in G Lydian, right, my 5 chord is major. That would be the one of the key signature if I'm in G Lydian. So yeah, the 5 minor on a major. I mean, if you could just play those 2. Right, just very Mixolydian sound. So hope that's working. I hope that helps. We're gonna go now to the minor. So now we're stepping into darker territory here. And we're going to start with Dorian, as that is the brightest of the 3 minors, okay? And we're leaving Locrian. I'm going to touch on it at the end, but I'm really considering, 3 bright major modes, right? Ionian, Lydian, and Mixolydian, and then 3 darker minor modes, right? I have Dorian, Aeolian, my natural minor, and then Phrygian, and then Locrian is sort of its own thing there, just because it's the half diminished or minor 7/5/5. What Dorian offers us is sort of the minor version of Lydian, which is really interesting because they are relative majors and minors, right? So like an A Dorian, right? If you consider that would be like the 2 if I'm going to build a Dorian. Right, its relative major C would be C Lydian, 2, 3, 4, right? 2nd mode, 4th mode, right? So there's a similarity there, and it's the same note. And what I mean by that is Lydian, the sharp 4. Let's say in this case I was C Lydian. The sharp 4 is that F sharp. That's the note that like really makes it Lydian, and that's what makes it feel a little lofty, right? A little dreamy, a little cloudy. And that note is the natural 6 in Dorian. So that F sharp is a natural 6 in my A Dorian. So it's that note that really does it. Because otherwise it's just natural minor. Dorian is natural minor with a raised 6th, a natural 6. So we want to make sure that we're going to hit that note, okay? So and a really good way to do it is if you look at, like, if I have, my major 6 or my major 4 chord has the 6 in it. So if I have a 1 minor to a 4 major, okay, got it, cool. Another power progression, so to speak, would be in a natural minor would be a 1, flat 6, flat 7, 1. Okay. Now that flat 6 is not going to work because it's a natural 6, right? So if we take that away, right, and I can have almost that F sharp, like a D major over F sharp, right? And then into so any way that you can really tackle that that natural 6 in there is going to be beneficial. Oye Como Va by Santana, Black Magic Woman, that they really utilize it there. It's a really nice way of a dark mode, but that natural 6, and thus really giving us a 4 major, a sort of subdominant, that 4 chord, making that major in a minor mode is what really gives it that brightness. I mean, it really brightens it up a lot. So how I would use this, sort of same idea. I don't know, maybe there is a little bit of like a drug and like a sadness that you're taking something to make yourself feel a little bit better. Like that's sort of the vibe here. I think the vibe, rather than Lydian, if we sort of like can look at it in a sort of songwriting perspective, some of the vibes that you can get out of this are a bit dreamy, but it's a depressed dream, right? Rather than a dreamy sort of bright side. Life is not going well, but for today it feels a little bit better, right? That could be like the ultimate vibe that Dorian can give you. Getting that 2 minor in there too is also helpful. So if I have a 1 minor to a 2 minor, right, it's basically like a 2 and a 3 back to back, but that becomes my tonal center. It's 1 minor to a 2 minor, and that really gives that natural 6. Again, just sort of mess around with it. Again, we can go with that idea of really bright. I mean, if I have A minor, C, D, and that D, that 4, that's where my F sharp is. That's the natural 6. But because that A minor is the first chord of a 4-bar phrase where the other 3 bars are major, right? C for 1 bar, C major, D major for 2 bars. It's still dark, right? It's still, right? You get a little relief, a little brightness when that F sharp happens, when that natural 6 happens in that D chord, that major third. So, that's how I would utilize that. On to the next one, Aeolian. That's natural minor. And, I love that expression because that's what it feels like. If I were to take just that progression, right? It's that D major that makes it Dorian. If I make it a D minor, now we're in like an A natural minor. It darkens everything up. Right? That flat 6 gives us a really dark sound. Right? And again, this is just the grand scheme of what's happening in this dialogue in your life is not good. How much you want to brighten it up by making it more major, by adding more major chords into your progression is sort of up to you. But the overarching theme is unstable sadness, and of course, the more you mess with it and the more you mess with tempo and everything like that, you can get different sounds. Another power progression, like we were saying before, is a 1, flat 6, flat 7, 1, right? Right? Or, Stairway to Heaven. It stays on that flat 6 chord, but really that being the first chord in the progression really delivers. the natural minor sound. A minor 4 chord, a 1 minor to a minor 4. Definitely very natural minor sound, right? Those two. So you really want to utilize that flat 6 in there, which is going to be there in the minor 4 chord, right, as the flat 3 in a minor 4 chord, or just the flat 6 chord. It's going to be there. So that's it. That's how I would use it. Natural minor. It's such a lovely sound because it's referring a little bit more to obviously the music theory side of it, but it's just a naturally minor sounding scale. And like you could take that into your songwriting and into your composition of just being like naturally feel minor. The next one, and I feel like there's a huge, I'm gonna just get this computer back on. I feel like there's there's a sizable drop. Dorian, natural minor, and then natural minor down to Phrygian, where before we sort of have this like Ionian and Lydian playing up together, and then Mixolydian down here, right? For my minor modes, it's very Dorian, and then natural minor, and then Phrygian. They're all relatively far apart here, and now Phrygian with the flat 2 gives it, in my mind, again, this can all be manipulated with progressions and tempo and riff, whatever. It gives it a darker, it's almost a haunting vibe, right? If I have right, that gives it dark, but not dark in a natural minor way, which is just like a post-divorce dark, sadness. This would be like post-divorce. Oh, you got some bad thoughts going through your mind. Like there's a little bit of death that I get from sort of a Phrygian sound, and it's used so much in metal. I mean, Symphony of Destruction by Megadeth. Remember Tomorrow by Iron Maiden, Wherever I May Roam by Metallica. It shows up so much in a way, right? In a sort of metal way, even if it's messing with the some metal will sort of mess with the key signature. So if it says I'm going to go to an E here. Right, that's sort of utilizing a blues, a 5, right, a sharp 4 power chord, a 4 power chord, right, but then going back, it's sort of utilizing that flat 2. That's a hugely Phrygian sound. Would be a 1 minor, a flat 2 major. That's really where we get that sound, again, happens a bunch in metal for sure, just because that's you're really utilizing and getting that dark sound. Now, again, we could take that, if I were to play something in, let's say B Phrygian. Right, and I wanted to do... definitely my key center, my tonal center, that B. Definitely change that to a 1 minor, flat 6, flat 2, back to the I'm brightening that up as much as I can by splitting it and having as many major chords as I am minor chords, but it's still going to come out. It's still going to come out that way. Lastly, and this is for another Locrian. Locrian. We're getting such a minor. That adds the ultimate. I mean, that almost, to me, it's like when I hear that, I think of like almost like a haunted house, dusty cobwebs and stuff, you know. It's really based off of that tritone, which was illegal at one point. I don't remember exactly when that was, but there was like an illegal sound because it thought it invoked the devil. You know, so that's really, I mean, that's the sound that's what I think of. If I was maybe scoring something like kids walking through an old dusty house, like in a horror movie. Do this, something like that. So that's how I would use that. And then how I was going to end this, and this is for another lesson, because this is more really understanding, you know, these sort of key colors, modal colors, and how to utilize them. Is my major chords. Do I want to use a major 7? It takes the brightness out of a major chord. If I have this C, if I have a 1 to a 4. I do that 4, but I make it a major 7. It just takes a little bit of the bright out of that, you know. If I was going to go back to Phrygian, you know, B Phrygian, right? A 1 minor to a flat 2 major. If I make that, that's gonna take the bright edge off of my major chord. You know, I want to make sure that it's the right major chord, because there is also that dominant 7 in there. You know, that's the dominant 7 is always tough to throw in if it's not resolving to its tonic, right? So what I mean by that is Sweet Child of Mine. If it's okay, that didn't get me where I wanted, you know. Wants to push so much to that, so you know, sort of understanding which one of the major chords is going to be, you know, a 7 chord is really important, because a major 7 won't work, and then that 7, you know, flat 7, that dominant is going to give it such that push that you might not want to use it in that particular way, and then same with minor. If I have you know, let's see, even a 1 minor to 4 minor, and I make both of those minor 7s, it actually brightens up the minor chord, right? And it's very subtle. Going from a major to a major 7 and just taking a little bit of that brightness away is subtle in the grand scheme of the sort of modal color that you're utilizing, as well as a minor to a minor 7, sort of taking away that darkness a little bit. And just to show you, and I said this is going to be a longer video in another lesson, but to see it visually, if my A minor, right, there's only 4 notes: a 1, a flat 3, and a 5, right? That's a triad, A minor. And A minor 7 is 4 notes: 1, flat 3, 5, flat 7. And what happens is that flat 3, 5, and flat 7 are a triad to its relative major chord. So it's almost like giving you a major triad in a minor chord, right? And that's why it takes a little bit of that edge off of that minor chord. And then same exact thing with major. If I have a G major, G major 7, my 3, 5, and 7 are just triad wise could be a 1 flat 3 5 starting on that 3. A B minor, as far as those 3 notes are concerned, is placed within a G major 7. So it takes that major sound and just makes it boop a little tiny bit darker. So again, more manipulation for you to get into down the line, but that is something to consider if you're darkening something up or brightening something up. You know what I mean? And you can mess around with those, whether they're minor sevens, major sevens, or that dominant seven, which I don't always recommend using unless you bring it back to the tonic. That's everything that I wanted to get into. I hope that was helpful. And, you know, something really cool to do now is whether you're writing your own stuff or there's a song that you've never thought of what the modal color is, you know, and you want to check it out, just look at the chord progression and be like, oh, that's a whatever. And it's really, really cool, you know, sort of exploration. So I hope that helped.